Hello. Good morning. All right. Well, I'm glad you guys got in today. It was quite a flood fest where I was coming from. But without further ado, I kind of want to get this session started. So this has a lot to do with coastal vulnerability, coastal impact, something that I know I'm very familiar with as a storm surge unit at the Hurricane Center. But I just kind of want to go ahead and get started. And I think our first presenter is Craig Setzer, who was one of our media kings formerly, but now works for Royal Caribbean. So without further ado, Craig, come on up and give us your spiel.
There you go.
Should I start over from the beginning?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's really an honor to be here and participate with the community, such as all of you here, because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And one thing I'm not going to do is sell you a cruise or even convince you that you should come on a cruise. I am a meteorologist for a cruise company. In fact, I'm the only meteorologist in the entire industry, which I think speaks to the lack of maritime meteorological emphasis. It's pretty amazing. It's almost since Dr. Henrik Tolman created the Wave Watch 3 model, all maritime meteorologists stopped there. It's like, we've got the Wave Watch model. We don't need to go any further. My goal with this company, and I appreciate being able to present because it's you guys reaching out and doing things that help the public, but it also has commercial benefits. So I don't want those lines to be crossed in any way. So I'm not selling anything. First off, why a cruise line meteorologist? Well, back in 2016, there was an event called the Anthem of the Seas, February, off the North Carolina coast.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're having a little glitch on the remote.
Okay.
Where it's not sharing the slide.
In my old TV days, they would say, toss to commercial break. We'll be right back.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Okay, we should be good now. So you can try advancing.
Okay, great. So first off, why a cruise line meteorologist? In 2016, a ship called the Anthem of the Seas ended up in a hurricane force low off the Carolina coast. The anemometer height, which was reduced, or the anemometer wind speed rather, which was reduced to sea level, recorded 146 knots with seas of 50 feet. One of the actions taken was that the cruise line company would hire an in-house meteorologist to oversee global weather events. Turned out that they hired a meteorologist and then they wanted a more operational focus, and so I got hired. What is a cruise ship? It's like a container ship, except our containers and our cargo are people. And unlike containers and cargo, people who have a bad experience let everybody know. And literally, it is like an all-inclusive resort on a ship. It's really quite amazing. In the cruise industry, there's the marine side, which I'm involved with. It's all the operations that are nautical and that are affected by meteorology. And there's what we call the hotel side that deals with all of the guests, excursions, everything like that. So there's many things that I have to watch out for. Of course, you would think of big wind and big seas, but there's also certain sea action or wave action that creates what's known as parametric roll. And parametric roll is a rolling action that is longitudinal along the ship. And that's one of the things. We haven't had an event, thankfully, like this, but it can be very, very damaging. This always makes lots of YouTube videos, and always they put the Titanic music under it when they share it on TikTok. One of the things our ships have to avoid that is what are called stabilizers, and they tend to dampen the roll. But the ship has to be moving at about 10 knots for those stabilizers to be effective. Significant heel. Heel is when the ship leans and it creates significant problems. This is on our Oasis class. There are pools up on the top deck, and then down over the side is what is known as Central Park on all of the Oasis class ships. This is Harmony of the Seas. And because of a strong wind and because the ship turned off its autopilot and started to turn, that heel created the pool to basically dump into Central Park. Now, thankfully, this isn't a safety issue. This is more of a visual issue. And one of the first people that got on the scene, they said, "What's going on? What's going on?" And he said, "The pools are emptying into Central Park." And they said, "How bad is it?" And he said, "Well, the water's going down the drains." So that was good. The problem is that all of the chlorinated water killed all of the vegetation in Central Park after that voyage. We're also concerned with small waves because of what we call tendering operations. So even though a big vessel might not respond to smaller seas, it's hard to get people off of a ship when we're in port or alongside of a port like that with tendering vessels. So my job is really multifaceted. I deal with what's called global cruise critical weather. In other words, I don't do day-to-day forecasts. We have weather vendors for that. I deal with voyage weather, where a voyage or ship destination might be impacted, and I deal with predicted and unforeseen events. Unforeseen, of course, are like the squalls that come off the coast, and the ship encounters 60-knot winds or something like that. A bigger thing I deal with is what's known as port weather, because when you're in port, you're really, really constrained by, are you going to be able to stay alongside the dock? Will you break the dock lines? Or if you move off the port, could you ground the vessel or potentially run into something else? Unforeseen port weather events are things like microbursts, where there's very little warning, and the ship needs to have some type of alerting method to be prepared for that. I started in July 17th, by the way. 1 month after I dealt with Hurricane Hillary. So the Royal Caribbean ship, Navigator of the Seas, had to leave. It was scheduled to leave Los Angeles and go to Ensenada in 2 days. Because Royal Caribbean ships are foreign flagged vessels, because of the Jones Act, it means they must visit a foreign port before they return to a U.S. port. If we couldn't go to a foreign port, it was a $3.3 million fine. My goal was to convince the company we could sail toward a hurricane without going into a hurricane. And remember, I'd only been there for a month, so they were like, "What are you talking about?" I also had to convince the company that we could ride out Hillary once we returned. We did, and I was on 2 of these this morning, by the way, so I haven't had much sleep. What's known as a full sit-rep call, where we have as many as 50 people on the line, the captain, the hotel, the comms, the port, fueling, provisioning, air and sea. All of these things are impacted when there's a ship deviation. So this was my sit-rep, and I basically said, here's the storm, there's some dry air coming in, which should weaken it, and using the HAFS A model, literally to all of these stakeholders, I explained where the outer extent of the tropical storm winds would be, how we could get into Ensenada, and then spend 4 hours there Saturday night and blast out of there, and then hide in the lee of the Channel Islands up there by Los Angeles. And the HAFS model worked out exceptionally well in this case. I even used, to help visualize it, the simulated radar as well to show where the impacts of the storm would be. So it turned out well. They said, "Wow, this worked out well, Craig. We saved $3.3 million. And I said, "Well, I need a raise or part of that." And they said, "No, that's not the way this works." My second weather challenge, remember, keeping the Anthem of the Seas incident in the back of my mind, was the day after, on August 18th, when Liberty of the Seas was returning from Bermuda to Bayonne or around the New York City area. There was a pre-frontal trough off the East Coast, and the OPC text forecast included a gale warning, winds to 40 knots. So I discussed with the captain, let's get out of Bermuda quickly and get across this trough here and get through these stronger winds, because the winds were forecast to strengthen through the afternoon. There was the text forecast from OPC, and even our weather vendor was showing high winds of 40 knots in the afternoon. So 8:30, I checked in the morning with the captain. Winds were 37 knots, so we were doing pretty good, going to get through these fast winds. An hour later, the captain sent me this snapshot from his screen with 65 knots. That's at 50 meters, 6 hours before the forecast, 150 miles away from where it was expected. Immediately, I thought of Anthem of the Seas. I thought, well, this was a short career at Royal Caribbean. Thankfully, and just a few little kind of interesting facts here, while the ship was making headway of 14 knots, it was literally being pushed sideways at 4 knots. And so this is what creates what we call a set, which is where The heading is this way, but across the water, it's a little bit to the sideways. The highest winds were 72 knots and 4-meter seas. And I can always go back and look at the wind data from the anemometer and everything like that. So what happened? The prefrontal trough had a convection associated with it, and we sailed right into a squall line, and you can see the wind gusts there coming out from the higher clouds. This wasn't detectable in the satellite imagery because it was underneath of the canopy clouds, the higher clouds. And so the lesson from this was to anticipate modeled convection will have higher winds. And that's what we do going forward now, at least that's what I do. The Idalia Weather Challenge, the end of August, multiple ship itineraries impacted. I used a multi-model and multi-ensemble, all kinds of things to kind of do it. This was my scratch sheet from that morning when I knew I was going to have to call a bunch of ships. I was thinking, okay, you need to slow down. You probably need to slow down. You from Tampa, you need to go as fast as you can to Cozumel. And the other ship, I don't know yet. We're going to work with you. Once again, I used the HAFS model to display the wind field, as well as ensemble models to display uncertainty and possible impacts. One thing I used a lot this year was the ensemble HAFS 34-knot probability graphics. I used it extensively. One of the best graphics that I've found from the HAFS suite there. And if you guys want to make this even bigger and better, please do, because this worked amazingly for decision making for me. Oh, sorry. You want to take a picture of that? Okay. let me go back one. There you go.
Craig, this is our first cut at it, so this is awesome to hear.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was great. If you can break them out in individuals, it'll be even better. I also had to do some ship guest messaging videos. And so one of the things I would do is use the wind speed probability threshold at around 33% overlaid with the cone to kind of show the extent of the tropical storm conditions. Worked very well. And then also I took the incremental wind speed probabilities and basically put a timeline in the upper left, and that worked very well too. Of course, the hurricane force wind speed probabilities is a lower threshold, so it looks like a bigger area just to show the uncertainty. One of our private destinations is what's known as Perfect Day at Coco Cay. Unfortunately, the weather is not always perfect there. And one of the issues I had was during Hurricane Lee with long period swell, because the ships go up and down when the waves are spaced far apart, like between 15 and 17 seconds. So I was able to find these from the ensemble wave model, and I could see the long period swell, but I couldn't predict in the northern Berry Islands, which are located right about there, what the actual swell was going to be. So I did it the hard way. I downloaded the GFS wave grid data. I used command line grid point extraction with WGrid2, and it was a painfully slow process. Painfully slow, because it was hour by hour, and it didn't give me what I needed. So my first amount of money they gave me was to hire a programmer and create a grid point destination, or grid point forecast with the wave height, the wave change, because I wanted dprog DT to see how the model was handling it, wave period and wave direction. And it turned out that my first trial was on this Monday, the 16th. I started this on Friday, and the first test, Wonder of the Seas, was scheduled to visit Coco Cay. And I said, Wonder of the Seas, I don't think you're going to be able to make it. And they're like, well, how would you know? This was what they showed as they pulled up that morning. And of course, they could not make the port, because not only could they not bring their vessel alongside because of the winds, but you can't get off of a ship when water is breaking over the pier. So they were thrilled to figure out that we could actually predict when wave events or wind events are going to occur in advance. Up until this point, they said, well, we'll just do a drive-by, and if we can't make it, we can't make it, we go to the next one. But once you know, and ahead of time, you can move itineraries around and visit at later dates. So, and I can't even describe how much revenue this location makes. So they were thrilled that they spent little money on a programmer to do something like this. So my goal is to create some weather tools, use long-range forecasts to correctly predict impactful weather. I use a multi-model approach. I'm trying to get everybody on board with a probabilistic approach and even develop port statistics with maybe unstructured grid data, or even nested models for some of our challenging ports, nesting on the port. I right now have to provide 24/7 support. I haven't had much sleep in 4 months. For the captains, I'm a second set of eyes, and basically I have a relationship with the captains, which is great. My role is expanded. Now I cover all of our ships across all of our brands, 63 ships, and I'm going to be hiring an assistant meteorologist. If anybody knows any marine meteorologists, please let me know. Thank you for your time.
All right, our next speaker is Dev.
Just 1 second to get the slide with you.
Well, good morning, everyone. When I saw the schedule earlier and I thought I'm the second speaker, this is so good, I can prepare. I didn't realize I was going to follow someone who was so good at this. So if you're looking for some good graphics, please remember from what was shown in the first one. And I'm going to supplement that with the text now. Essentially, just before I was coming here to this talk, to the podium, we just got the email that our BAMS paper about the NOAA-MP community workshop summary just got published 2 minutes back. So that is pretty great. And there are 4 main highlights that have come from this community workshop related to NOAA-MP. And I will be highlighting on that. And I'm assuming this is not going towards my time, so I'm going to use some of the slides. One of which is the creation of a academic collaboratory. And the reason for that I'm going to show is NOAA-MP, as you know, has gotten into HAFS and other priorities. It is a part of UFS and other systems. And the academic community is not as well organized as it should be in terms of aligning it to the priorities, because there are lots of exciting things happening right now related to land, particularly as we are getting into IPCC cities assessment coming up in 2 years, as we are getting into this whole digital twin machine learning era. We are getting new satellite products. So aligning it to model development has been not necessarily the #1 priority. We talked about DA yesterday. The other one I would say is related to the land. And in fact, the land DA is one of the top priorities that have come from this workshop as well going forward. I was also very pleased to listen to some of the initial presentations and the community feedback. And I was hoping I'll catch up Jamie before I come here, but I'll talk to him after this, where we have created a city climate collaboratory. So I presume my time will start shortly.
Yeah, you're
Okay, good. So good morning again. My name is Dev Niyogi, and I am now with the University of Texas at Austin. I moved there in the middle of pandemic. Prior to that, I was at Purdue. I moved to UT because a lot of my research has been on urban extremes, and particularly Harvey. As you know, Houston is a magnet for hurricanes and extreme weather, and that's a great place to study urban extremes. So that has been the place I've been part of, and I've been having fantastic time working with different departments, particularly the computational science community on that. What I'm going to talk about is a foundational work that comes up from a series of papers over the last 15, 20 years. We have been looking into the context of antecedent land conditions and how the representation of land affects tropical storms in terms of the structure, monsoon depressions in some instances, how it has affected the rainfall from hurricanes, the hurricane post-landfall re-intensification and feedback. Some of you might see Monica Boziano there. She had been doing some of the initial HFIP work that Frank, Vijay, Gopal, and several of us had done. This work has emerged in the context of putting land as one of the drivers that we would want in terms of how the post-landfall or even the land approaching hurricanes or tropical systems will be affecting. Much of this work has been based on models. And in the models, as you know, we can get some of the output that we want because they are all somewhat biased. If you go to the next slide. Two recent papers I'll highlight, which are of special relevance. One is on the impact of urban representation on the simulation of hurricane rainfall. As you know, one of the largest impacts from hurricane rains has been urban flooding and some of the issues that come up, especially in the underprivileged communities. And so the point we are making is that if you represent urban processes in a forecast model, your ability to simulate the structure of rainfall over urban regions exceptionally increases. That was one finding. The second important finding was that you don't necessarily go into an extremely complex urban model. As long as you are getting some of the urban energetics right, getting the boundaries correct, the gradients right, you will be able to capture some of the feedbacks, and that's really the thing. So it is a matter of strategy in terms of saying that we will want to put urban into system. That's the other one. The second one has been, as I'm showing, that the post-landfall rains and the antecedent conditions affecting the hurricane rains has been something we have been observing a lot in models, but we have always been looking for observational evidence for that. With Cygnus and SMAP, we could get a lot of that data together, and we looked at a series of systems. One of the cleanest signatures we saw was for Hurricane Florence, and where we could see that there is a wet antecedent land conditions we have always hypothesized could intensify post-landfall rains in terms of more heavy rains and so forth. What was not seen is that why we were not getting a clear signature in the North Atlantic region as we were getting in the monsoon regions, for instance, where if you had a wetter conditions, you could always imagine that the depression of the system will move much farther inland than what is happening in the US, for instance. So what we find is that you have a temperature feedback embedded in there, that when you have higher temperature and higher soil moisture, it creates a different enthalpy, and that's going to have a longer inland track. Lower rain temperatures, wetter soils, or higher drier soils and higher temperatures, each of those three combinations would create a different inland contribution. Point being, this is now starting to emerge as we're looking at more observational data. We'll go to the next one. So if we go to the NOAA MP now, which is the one where we want to start putting together all this information, NOAA MP is a sleeping dragon, and it has been invoked. It has thousands of literal combinations that can and will be used by the community as they start playing with the system. There is a clear need that we start putting teams together to start identifying which combinations of what priority we need to pull together to make the best interaction with the boundary-less systems. Next slide, please. So in fact, this is the community workshop that just happened last year with over 200 participants that we had, and I think Mike Eck, when he's here, will probably talk more about this. But one of the factors that came up was the improvement of land physics, particularly that will go from the seasonal to subseasonal, subseasonal to seasonal, as well as the DA part that we talked about. The third one was the inclusion of urban and agriculture as the two largest lands that are not really well represented, and we need to put that into NOAA, and the creation of the academia collaboratory because it is otherwise disparate. We'll go to the next slide, please. So these are the four things I want to really highlight. One, NOAA academic community that is coordinated partner in HFIP and other NOAA programs. But I think HFIP is a great place where this could be highlighted for the next 5 years. Academia work closely in terms with other NOAA. Second is agriculture as a dominant land cover that can affect coastal systems and need to prioritize that within the NOAA development. Third is what I discussed yesterday as well. A lot of push happening in terms of the AI and machine learning approaches and digital twins, and using that to continue developing community-specific tools, sort of like what was in the previous section, and I'll show a quick example. And the fourth one is create regional test beds that can allow for academia and community to work more actively with this community, because we'll be more familiar with the system that we are working with, say in the Houston area or the Caribbean region and so forth. So these would be my four suggested considerations for the HFIP priorities in the coming 5 years, and I think it will have a good resonance with regards to the academia and so forth. We can go to the next slide. So urban problems, as we know, we faced them yesterday. Let's continue on to that. This has been one aspect we are going. Go to the next slide. So for that, what have we been doing? There's one thing about representing processes, but another thing creating globally available data sets, because the models need to create that. I don't need to tell you. One of which has been the creation of the World Urban Data Analysis and Portal tool, the WOOD app. This is now integrated within WRF, is now becoming available globally. This we have. This is based on OpenStreetMap. It is a nice mapping of urban covers. We can go to the next slide. We show, and I'm going to show some examples outside US because it is emblematic of where we do not have data. And while we have data for, say, Houston or New York City or some places, it is many of these emerging cities which we do not have data for. And so when we are trying to get that information, it is really important to create a synthetic data sets. So this shows an example about a wood app for a heavy rain case in the Arabian Sea region, and we can see it has a positive impact on a consistent basis for improving the heavy rains, particularly in the coastal region. Next one. Yeah, thank you. So point I was making is about availability of lack of data, and this is something we have a lot of satellite data sets. We can actually work with the machine learning community, the computer vision community, and we have been going in terms of creating a deep learning based urban morphology at a global scale. So this is a paper that came out in the PNAS Nexus just this year, where we have created, as if you are sitting in one of those arcades where you see that streets and cities, but this is made out of gaming. And out of that gaming, you can create the same data set as if it was observed by a LiDAR and input that to a weather model and then create a system. So you see in C and D, the C is which has been created by the gaming machine. D is the actual observation from Google Earth. So putting that information into the weather model, this is for Chicago, the model can actually replicate and create a data set and model fields which are almost as if this were generated from LiDAR data set or any other high resolution product. So this is what I was talking about. There's a huge ability for using generative AI in creating the data we want in the models where we do not have such models. Next one, please. This is an example again for Dublin, where I'm showing just, we can't necessarily figure out which is computer generated, AI generated, and which is a Google Earth image in terms of our land data sets. Next one, please. But what it allows us is to query the data and then create the parameters we want in terms of what we need. And so now we have created a building height data set for all the global cities. This is open data set for building height called UT Globus, Global Building Height for Urban Studies. We have shown this for each of the large cities, including for the Paris Olympics RDP that we are going to have this December, where this is going to be used for some of the Paris events and so forth. This allows us to create the parameters that are required by the model. So it is not just the data, but also data parameters that go in. Additionally, we have created the first ever city climate collab, which translates the information by working with city and community in terms of local skill products and where such kind of thing. So we take the local experience, we provide the local data, and we help them create some informed decisions that we're talking about. So here is one example, which is using a thermal scape that telling communities this is what will happen in terms of a heat event, and making them virtual reality in terms of making them understand what could happen in the community. This is what we can do for hurricane and rains and so forth. And this is where I think we need to put some of the resources together in terms of the next one. The other quick one I'll say is a super resolution where we are using AI/ML for downscaling the data products. There are again vision algorithms. This is an example of a 5-kilometer rainfall product brought down to 300 meters in terms of how the rainfall would be changing across the city and what it could mean in terms of localized flooding or just a nuisance flooding kind of scenarios that we have. Next one, please. And lastly, I'll say we have been working with the NOAA AI groups, and we have been creating the Urban Digital Twin Framework. We are part of the WCRP Digital Earth Framework. And in fact, in spring, we'll be having a workshop in terms of bringing all the AI/ML approaches, both in terms of updating the data products that are required for the land community, as well as for creating community tools based on that. So in the last slide, I'll say that again, highlighting that NOAA needs this academic community to work together, because we can literally go any direction. It'll be great. We can converge onto what is needed here. Urbanization and agriculture could be the two top priorities. We have tremendous capabilities now available within the community for AI machine learning approaches. Bring them into this framework of what HFIP needs, and then create regional test beds for creating the academia community partnerships where all this information can be then made available. One quick example of how community helped us actually develop a parameterization in the model is that the community came up with a solution that they wanted trees on the streets. In our urban model, either we have an urban street or trees. We don't have trees in the street. And so one of the projects we have now taken based on what the community needs is putting trees in the street. And that's, of course, globally that can be going forward. So I'll just stop there and thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker will be Saeed, who will provide updates from the NOS storm surge modeling team.
Thank you, Cody. I'm Saeed Moghimi, part of National Ocean Services, the storm surge modeling team. Today, I'm going to provide you with a very brief updates on what we are doing and what we are involved with. So just to start, on the left-hand side, you see the Stuffs 2D Global, which are, and then on the right-hand side, Stuffs 3D, different component and coverages as we are working on them. I'm going to give you more information about those two or couple of different components that we have under the hood and the Stuffs in a moment. Next slide, please. And as everything else, it's not just one team work. It's really a network of scientists and postdocs and PhD students on academia, as well as working very closely with our NOAA and agency partners, international partners, as well as our industrial and cooperative partners to make these things happen. Next, please. So just to give you a brief overview of the Stuffs and other storm surge modeling products and services here. So starting with the operational components. Currently, surge and tide operational forecast system, briefly Stuffs, has two components in operation. One is a two-dimensional global that we call Stuffs 2D Global. This is based on ASIC, and we are going to talk about it a little bit more later. And then a three-dimensional and coastal storm surge, including inland hydrology extremes, that we call it the Stuffs 3D Atlantic. On the right-hand side, you see a graphics of zoom in of the Stuffs 3D Atlantic mesh for lower Mississippi River. And as you can see, we are highly resolving almost all of the river reaches as well as inland waterways. Again, it's fully digested the national water model inland hydrology inputs, as well as we are considering heavy precipitations both on land as well as on the water side of the model to include this type of information also when we are calculating and providing weather guidances for coastal flooding. We also have on a pre-operational situation right now, we have a Stuffs 3D Pacific. It's almost a year that this system is in pre-operational testing. So we are planning to bring this component also into operation in 2024. On a research and development side, one of our very exciting projects that we just started almost a couple of months ago is to support development of NOAA's next generation probabilistic storm surge model, or NHC's P-Search. So we are also involved in that project to support, to some extent, I have one slide to talk about it more on what we are doing. In connection to that project, we are also heavily invested on automated, on-demand, unstructured mesh generation. And we have a Python package developing in the past couple of years. And then we also just started again another project for developing two-dimensional guidance system for Alaska, which is going to be the Stuffs 3D Alaska. And this is part of the disaster supplemental fund that we got. And this specific project going to be a UFS ready, and we are planning to also couple this via UFS coastal to sea ice and wave components. We are also working on other kind of fronts. One of most important ones is developing UFS coastal. And also in some of the projects, we are supporting Department of State overseas building operations for risk assessment to some of their overseas locations we had in Middle East, as well as in Pacific, one or two projects already finished on that. Next, please. So in terms of our end users and the stakeholders, one of our most important stakeholders are our partners within NOAA Weather Service. Specifically NOAA Weather Forecast Offices, or WFOs. We are very much into continuous collaboration and conversation with them during the operation, as well as when we are kind of building our next upgrades. They are using our model outputs for generating flood forecasts during winter storms mainly. We are also working with National Weather Center on supporting them with some of our technology that we are developing, as well as for topography information and a variety of other topics. Working with Environmental Modeling Center, EMC, for instance, supporting nearshore wave prediction systems and some of other operational things going on there. We also, as I mentioned, we are also so closely working with National Hurricane Center on the development of the next generation P-Search. On the other side, we're also coming from Office of Coast Survey and being at National Ocean Services, we also want to have always an eye on supporting mariners and pilot ships to navigate in and off the ports. So we are working with different programs and like precision navigation and other programs at NOS. Have in mind our main kind of area is to work with resiliency, coastal resiliency, and disaster mitigation. However, we also have an eye on how we can support mariners and safe navigations. Next, please. So again, this is the current operational components of surgeon-type operational forecast systems, STOFs. So on the left-hand side, you see the domain for the STOFs 3D Atlantic. It's based on SCISM model component. It provides water surface elevation, current, temperature, and salinity as an output in a layered or three-dimensional fashion. As I said, it's inland hydrology enabled, so National Water Model is fully integrated. All of the river reaches and tributaries are included without any exception. The resolution-wise, it goes from 7 kilometers almost in the ocean all the way to meter scale when we are resolving streams, levees, and man-made structures. On the right-hand side, we have the 2D global model. This is a depth-integrated model, so mainly relying on water surface elevation for tide and surge. This is one of the highest resolution storm surge models global with a global coverage, and to our understanding is the highest also accuracy on non-data assimilative tide model globally. And again, grid resolution goes to around 100 meters at an average on US waters. Next, please.
You got a little over 2 minutes.
Okay, so it's just a case. Again, it's a deterministic model, but I just wanted to showcase the performance of the STOFs 3D Atlantic in Hurricane Idalia, as you can see. And this is just a forecast, and we have observation on top of it. And later you can use the link I provided here to go ahead and explore this case on your own. Next, please. Just to touch on briefly on support developing of the next generation NHC P-Search. Again, this is going to be the probabilistic side. Our role mainly is to see how we can include SCISM as a new hydrodynamic core. And this is also in connection, as you can see on the right-hand side, how we are using the on-demand mesh generation subsetting to reduce the footprint, computational footprint. So we can use the same amount of computation to kind of do in kind of ensemble mode. So we get probabilistic. We also have some implementation on using machine learning AI to build surrogate and using the surrogate to increase the number of ensemble without actually running the model. So these are in a project in progress, and hopefully in the next HFIP we have more information to share with the team. Next, please. And again, as I said, one other area that we are heavily involved with is the development of a UFS coastal, working with Office of OAR and National Weather Services to build this. And This is going to be including kind of a couple of different ocean components, ROMs, FVCOM, ATSIC, and SCISM going to be included in this system. And we fork directly from UFS weather model. And again, we'd be more than happy to provide more in-depth briefing about this topic. And last slide, please. Next. So just, again, just the overlook of what we have done so far. So the STOFs, as I said, the most important thing is going to happen is bringing STOFs really Pacific in operation in 2024. Please look into the NOS coupling infrastructure we are developing. Specifically right now, we are concentrating on UFS coastal code base, just for basically building the codes. And next is to start looking to UFS coastal workflow for different application. And at the end, as I suggested and talked about, we are also actively working with our colleagues at National Hurricane Center to see how we can support the next generation research development. And I will stop here. And next slide is the last slide. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker will be Greg Soroka, who will be providing a perspective on the UFS coastal modeling application team.
Thank you. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I'm giving this talk on behalf of Dr. Shahak Bahiri, who is the lead for the UFS coastal applications team. I think he was asked to give an update on what we're doing in the coastal applications team over the past couple of years, and also looking into the future. Our co-leads for the safe and efficient navigation part of this project are myself, John Kelly, and Ayumi. They're listed there. Just to say that there are 3 different sub-applications, working groups for this safe and efficient navigation, risk reduction, and total water level. As you can imagine, risk reduction and total water level are probably more appropriate to this audience, but I think we think some of the infrastructure that we're developing for safe and efficient navigation can be applied certainly to these other different teams. So next slide, please. So some background on the coastal applications team. It's part of the larger development of UFS, includes federal and academic partners. As you all imagine, we need to consolidate the individual modeling systems into a lower number for reduced operations and maintenance. So what we're doing in the Marine Navigation Working Group is to evaluate the leading oceanographic circulation models that can operate in complex coastal environments and can support the navigation community in those efforts. Next slide, please. So we have, as Saeed mentioned, for the storm surge modeling, we also, in this effort, we have a bunch of team members. Myself and John and Ayumi are the co-leads, but we also have Shahak Bahiri, who's the overall coastal applications team co-lead with Joe Sankowitz. We also have many different academic partners that I'll talk about a little bit, their role in terms of testing these models. And we would really like to thank the NOAA NOS Water team for supporting funding over the last 2 years, or the 2 years of FY23 and FY24. Also, Dr. Chen and Dr. Zhang, who are the model developers at UMass Dartmouth and William & Mary. And then, of course, University of Texas Austin TAC, they provided the development workspace and IT support for developers and testers to evaluate the models. Next slide, please. So UFS Coastal Applications Team, or CAT, requested all 3 working groups, as I mentioned, the sub-application teams, to generate consensus guidelines for a model evaluation. So these are metrics, criteria, and competing numerical oceanographic models. So on the left, you see the white paper that we created and wrote for the navigation sub-application. Also for the other 2, we have white papers on these requirements. So you can see on the right, what we're evaluating is the coastal ocean model or hydrodynamic model, but it's within this coupled system with the numerical weather model, which can be anything from GFS or HAFS or what have you, to the inland hydrology model, wave model, and then those applications. So really trying to build out this infrastructure one step at a time, and really to build the community of supporting these models. So it's not like a one point source that if there's a failure, then it just goes to that one developer. So really building the community on this. Next slide, please. So for marine navigation specifically, we are looking to support the waterway and ports of the U.S. And the mariners need forecast guidance. And as you could see in some of Craig's talk, water levels, surface water currents, sea and lake ice, and water temperature and salinity. We've collected user requirements from across the broad navigation community. You can see it includes NWS and private forecasters, as well as marine navigation system manufacturers, et cetera. So International Hydrographic Organization, or IHO, has also been collecting user requirements. So they're working on product standards, the IHO S100 suite, and those will be used for carrier suite on certain vessels that can be displayed on ECDIS, or electronic chart display information system. So on the right, you see surface currents that are depicted on the ECDIS, and then top right, you see the ECDIS system there. We also considered winds and waves, but we aren't evaluating those in this effort. Next slide, please. So I won't go into detail about these requirements. You can look at the slides later, but these are the forecast configuration requirements we developed in the first phase of this project. You can see resolution, spatial reference system, which is critical, especially for water levels, forecast range, reliability, et cetera. Next slide, please. Also, accuracy requirements, won't go into details, but we developed the accuracy requirements for water level, surface currents, ice, water density, for buoyancy in the ships and draft, and then product formats, which include the S100 suite there. Next slide, please. I wanted to go in a little bit of the operational requirements, which is a critical component for UFS. So the stability and computational efficiency, it needs to be fast and reliable for the forecaster or the mariner. Needs to be accurate based on physical calculations and physical processes. Resolution, we're providing bathymetry grids, so the mesh needs to be high enough resolution in the unstructured grid for the forecaster. And then code management needs to be by that scientific community, as I mentioned, coupling in that Earth system. And then the community and support and license needs to be open source. That's a critical component. So it should be licensed CC0, but that's one of the big drivers here. It needs to be open source and open development even. And then NOAA readiness levels, of course, and then geographic coverage. We're looking to support United States top 50 ports. Next slide, please. So we selected in the first phase for navigation the models FECOM and SCISM. The first round, we're only evaluating tides. So the 8 constituents, the top 8, were used for tidal forcing, where the top 4 on the list were evaluated in the skill assessment. So we look at 2 hindcast periods. They're both 3 months. One is January, which includes a couple of nor'easters, and then one in the summer, which includes hurricanes, Elsa, Henri, and Ida. So it can be these time periods can be applied to these other risk reduction total water level applications. Also, I'd note that there's likely sea ice in the first hindcast period there. Next slide, please. So the study site is New York Harbor. We provided bathymetry, which is that image on the left, with the resolution for the DEMs, or digital elevation models, that were provided to the testers. And the goal is to resolve small riverine areas at about 10-meter horizontal resolution. You can see the blessed, we call it blessed schism mesh on the right, top right, and then blessed FECOM mesh on the bottom right, and zoom in to some of the smaller areas there for the mesh. Next slide, please.
3 minutes.
So outcomes, we were trying to get to the storming and norming phases, so no specific results were provided. Rather, the results were really focusing on the successes and challenges, and also lessons learned. So success 1 is the communication and team building. We had regular meetings that provided opportunities for questions and feedback. The success 2 is really for the testers to learn the models and exposure to the NOAA operations, which can be black box to some. And then conducting the skill assessment really was a success against 23 stations in New York Harbor and surrounding area. Next slide, please. So challenge number 1 is consistency and guidance. So a lot of the testers wanted more guidance. So we really were trying to provide a baseline configuration so they could choose to start with that and to conduct their sensitivities. Issues with DEMs, critical. We found issues in the DEMs in Arthur Kill and Bayonne channels. So we provided an updated DEM, and it resulted in a really immediate improvement in the skill assessment. And then lessons learned, the meetings, there was really successful monthly meetings, and also lower stakes bi-weekly meetings for just the students to ask questions, so they felt safer there. And then the clearer guidance, consistency, as I mentioned. So really balancing freedom and flexibility for the testers with guidance that we can provide to the testers. Next slide should be my last slide. So next steps and recommendations. So we're in the second round of the testing evaluation. So we're adding atmospheric forcing, and then also running the model in 3D. So GFS, HER, and then ocean, global arctops, and river national water model and USGS, evaluating water levels, water currents, water temperature, and salinity. Surface currents of the top 4.5 meters for the main ship draft. And we'll really share the results to the developers and UFS community for feedback. We're also evaluating time of performance and use of the elevation models and calibration and skill assessment. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right. So these next few talks